It's the strangest thing to jump out at me, but I notice one thing immediately when it comes to Master of Monsters. That is the worst placement of title text on the cover. You can't even see the monsters' heads. How are you supposed to tell that guy is the Master of Monsters? When you look at the gameplay of Master of Monsters, you might think, hey, that looks an awful lot like Daisen Ryaku. Okay, you might only think that if you're somebody who pores over Japanese video games constantly, but that is what this channel's all about. Master of Monsters was created to be a spin-off of Daisen Ryaku. It moved the grand strategy from a real-world, real militaries, real hardware setting to one of classic high fantasy. Master of Monsters was originally created for computer systems by developer SystemSoft, and it was a huge hit. Huge enough that the game even got a US version, though only the Genesis version. The PC Engine version was done by Microcabin, who had worked with SystemSoft in the past, and were also a very big name in Japanese computer games. And for this PC Engine CD version, they went all out. 2 full campaigns, dozens of additional scenario maps, graphics taken from the recent PC-98 port, and of course a whole new soundtrack. Master of Monsters is one of those strategy games that doesn't really have a plot, just a concept. Every player takes the role of some kind of spell-slinging jerk, and then up to 4 of them fight for dominance over a tiny piece of land. Before you get to that point though, first you have to set up your game. And this occurs in 3 steps. First, you have to pick a map, or bundle of maps. If you're playing a campaign, it'll have a series of linked scenarios, and your forces and their experience will carry over between the maps. While I was recording, I wound up playing the Vice scenario, because how could you resist that name? Then you have to set up the players. There's 6 different kinds of spellcasters that you can select from: Sorcerer, Wizard, Necromancer, that kind of thing. For the most part, the names don't really tell you a whole lot about them. The difference between them is which monsters they're masters of. Plus, there's a bit of difference in how they cast spells. Finally, you have to set up the rules of the game. How many magic points each player gets a turn. How many turns there will be. If you want to watch every turn play out in full. I chose to do that for the sake of footage, and it was probably a mistake. Once you're all set up, it's time to play. Your goal in every scenario is to kill all of the other spellcasters on the map. These casters aren't very good in combat themselves, and so to kill their neighbors and protect themselves, they'll need to master some monsters. To do that, you have to pick a hex around your character, and then if there's a structure on it that you control, you can choose to summon. Every monster has an MP cost, and they all have an alignment of Law, Neutral, or Chaos. Lawful monsters get a 25% bonus during the day and a minus 25% penalty at night, while chaotic monsters have the reverse of that. That might make it sound like neutral monsters are your best bet, but the additional power that comes from picking a side comes in very handy sometimes. Turn 1 of the game starts at dawn, and then with every turn it progresses to day, dusk, night, and then back to dawn. So plan your summons accordingly. There's another type of summons for spirits, and these tend to be more costly than the regular monsters, but are also more effective. The number of monsters you can summon is limited, and not just by the amount of magic that you have. You cannot summon more monsters than you have towers under your control. The maps are dotted with these sites, and you capture them simply by moving one of your units onto them. The other major thing that you can do as a Master of Monsters is cast a Grand Spell. These are abilities that affect monsters on the field and can do things like heal one of your monsters back to full, or cause one of your enemy monsters to lose their next turn. The spell list varies with every class, and you are limited to casting 1 spell a turn. They also cost about as much as summoning 1 monster. But if you've already made your army as big as it can get, as you might expect, monsters have movement points that affect how quickly they cross terrain, and some monsters handle certain areas better than others. There's aquatic monsters that can take to the seas, and flying monsters that can cover a lot of ground. After you move, you can choose to attack. though the top option is to end the monster's turn right there, so be careful of that. When you attack, you get a little cutscene showing the monsters battling, and the stats indicate how many attacks they get per combat, then their defense, which I think is the terrain defense bonus, and finally the monster's chance to hit with each of their attack types. I'm not positive about that defense bonus because the manual doesn't tell you what any of the stats on the combat screen are for. You don't have any control over your monsters in combat. They pick the attack that they're going to do, and then they take turns swiping at each other. If a monster manages to kill another, then it gets some experience points, and if one survives long enough, it can level up. Though the experience gains here are so slow that they're going to have to survive for quite a while. A problem that I ran into while playing was that the computer player's turns were very slow. I only had 2 opponents instead of 3, and toward the end of my recording session, it was taking 6 full minutes from the point when I hit end turn to the point when I could start taking actions again. Now, like I said, I chose to make the entirety of the other player's turns visible, and that included the long combat sequences. So, fair enough. But even without the long combat animations, you're still looking at around 2 minutes between turns. Master of Monsters is a game that plays very slowly. As I mentioned, Master of Monsters was very popular in Japan, and the PC Engine version is well regarded. There are certain strategies that have been identified to trivialize the game. It seems I picked the worst character, unfortunately. But despite the problems, people still seem to like it. There was a sequel, Master of Monsters 2, that was released on computer systems barely a month after this PC Engine version. And then there was Masters of Monsters Final, which of course was followed up by Masters of Monsters 3. My own feelings on this one are a bit complicated, because this is one of those situations where I'm really feeling like I couldn't give this game a proper chance. It's the kind of game that you need to play for 10 or 20 hours before you really have a grip on it. I will say that I like it better than Daisen Ryaku. There's just a lot more strategic options for you. And I think how the game goes for you is going to depend a lot on which scenario you're playing. Being the yellow player on the Vice map meant I was isolated by myself behind a mountain range while the other 2 players beat each other up. I had to slowly work my way around and over to get into conflict with them. I can say that Masters of Monsters has some pretty neat ideas behind it, and it has enough of a hook to make playing out a full scenario pretty compelling. I mainly wish the game would just go a bit faster.